What's up, guys? My name is Blob and welcome to another episode of Pause. Right here we are starting off in the Amur leopard feeding area, and that is because I just wanted to go through a few of the changes. So what you see before you now is the before, and then in a moment there'll be a cut just to show you the after, and then I'll just run through the changes. I just wanted to decorate this area up a little bit. It was looking a little bit barren, and you can see there on the ground the concrete doesn't quite blend how I wanted to with the rest of this area. So it's going to take a quick jump and then we'll have a look at the changes afterward. And here we are with the after changes. Don't worry, this isn't what all the video is going to be. The point of today's video is going to be us decorating to the right of the Amur leopard habitat, going toward what is going to be a creek. And hopefully I'm going to be showing you a lot of terrain tips and pathing tips for today's video. But before you can see the changes to this area, we've added a fence and foliage here. The fence I was going to make taller, but I kind of like the idea of being able to see over the fence slightly so that you can sort of get a bit of mystique about it. You're like, oh, something's obviously going on over there, but you're not sure what it is. And the next time you come, you might be encouraged to pay that little bit extra to go and do one of these feeding experiences as a guest. But now we're going to go and have a look inside the feeding area to the area adjoining the grove. And here we are to the area adjoining the grove with the sty there. This isn't going to be your main way of traveling. This is something that you're going to be sort of kind of discouraged from using, but if you have to, members of staff can obviously use this as well to get through to the grove, like security personnel quickly if there was an emergency in the grove. But not much here, just something to get over the fence a little bit easier. And here we are into the meat and gravy. This is going to be what we are going to be working on today. We're going to be working on this area to the right. I need to do a cover for this Amur leopard area, but as of yet I haven't done it, and I'm going to be working on that at a later date. I just want to sort of get the terrain work and the pathing done for this new area that's going to be going off in this direction over here. I'm going to have to move these buildings, but the idea being is that the creek will start at the top here and cascade its way down here, and then in front of us we're going to have a bridge that goes across the creek, and then on the other side we're going to have a flat platform for guests to be able to view. And then over on the other side of the creek, we're going to have a lodge that guests can stay in to overlook the animal that's going to go in this habitat. I already know what's going to be going in here, but yeah, that's going to be the general plan and gist for this episode. We're not going to be doing the habitat, just going to be working on the terrain work around this area. But the first order of business is going to be some pathing and some tips regarding pathing. Basically, there's going to be an incline that goes up to this area, so it's going to be a little bit of a tip regarding if you're working with inclines. When you're doing ramps and stuff like that, you want to be aiming for around about a 3-degree incline. Anything sharper than that and you are going to be busting people's ankles. And it's also quite awkward to push things like wheelchairs up a sharp incline. So you want to try and keep this angle as shallow as possible, while also giving the illusion that you are going up quite steeply. And obviously ramps are a bit more awkward to work with than things like stairs. Stairs, you can cover a greater altitude climb over a shorter distance than what you would with ramps, so it does require a little bit more space in terms of getting up to a certain altitude that you might want, but I think it's absolutely worth it in terms of the aesthetic that it gives. But over here we're just going to do a little bit of an example of what I'm talking about in terms of inclines and your paths in your zoos. So here I am just making a little bit of a mound, and then I'm going to put a path on it. And while the path itself will still function, as in guests will still be able to walk up and down it, like I said before, when you're dealing with things like this, you really want to keep that incline as shallow as possible, because if you were to try and walk on this, yeah, your ankles aren't going to be lasting very long. They're going to be broken pretty quickly. So you really want to keep this angle as shallow as possible to try and make it easier for people to walk on, as well as making it compliant with things like wheelchair access as well. So here we are now applying that to this area here. You'll see that I'm going to be using a few tips that I've explained quite a few times here, but I'm going to try and highlight them a bit better than I have done in the past. So down here in the bottom right, you'll see me using the flatten to foundation tool. It's one of the best tools for doing slants like this. And here on the right hand side is a very important thing. You really want to make sure that you're using a low intensity for this. And in terms of size, you always want to try and make the size maybe 1 or 2 meters larger than the width of the path you're going to be using. If you're going to be using a 4-meter path, use 5 meters in terms of the size, or 5 in terms of the size. Just remember to keep that intensity down on a low intensity. Not too low. 10-20% isn't really going to do anything, but around about 40% is what I tend to find to be the sweet spot when you're working with something like this. And then just make sure that you're going through and placing paths down as you go as well, just to test the incline. Sometimes I find that when you're looking at it just with the terrain paint, it doesn't really tell the real story of what's going on. It's only until you actually put the pathing down that you get to see what is going on with the pathing that's actually happening. I don't know whether it's like the colors that make it an illusion or what, but yeah, just always make sure that you're testing your paths to make sure that they follow like a smooth incline and there's no like weird ridges and bumps when you're doing this as well. Just always constantly clicking to make sure that you are sort of trying to smooth this out as much as you can. And again, I can't stress it enough, down in the bottom right there, you see I don't change the intensity at all when I'm doing this. It might be very tempting to increase the intensity to help speed up this process, but I tend to find that when you try and speed up this process and rush it, you end up with more mistakes. So really do take your time when you're doing this. This next part is going to be a bit sped up just so that you're not missing anything, but it's just going to be me laying out the path and how far I want it away from the window of the Amur Leopard indoor viewing area, and then just finishing up the foliage leading up this little incline as well. But you'll literally just be seeing me do what I've been saying from the get-go, constantly clicking low intensity, and then yeah, getting these paths in just to work out where I roughly want them to go. These aren't going to be staying here for the time being. It's just to give myself like the spacing in this little gap between the window, the path, and then the piece of dirt here in between. And then you see me start decorating it with the usual temperate colored faux rocks with a fence, and then creosote bushes, and I think I even put like a tree in here as well, like an ash tree. Really underrated tree. Make sure you're using it in the game. And I can't say it again, like I'm literally just you're gonna see me deleting the path, just constantly trying to get this path how I want it to go. And I get kind of close in a moment, like you can see that when you're standing at a shallow angle, you can see that it's a much shallower incline than what we were originally dealing with. But there were a little few too many bumps for my liking, so just wanted to smooth those out. And for that you can use the smooth tool, so don't be afraid to use that. Once you've got the main part of your incline, you can see there on the right there's a little bit of a divot going down, and then I sort of decide that I want the path to wrap around and connect, and then sort of be like a Y-shape path as well. But I'm going to have some tips regarding doing paths like those in just a second for you, because obviously pathing in this game can be very tedious and annoying to work with. But just going through here, shallowing this out, and I think I get to a point where I'm like, yeah, I'm happy with this, and I get it to join the path at this angle here. But like I say, I want it to join at this other corner as well at a Y shape, and here's my tip on dealing with that. So here we are, path corners. So there are two ways that you can tackle this. You can either do the traditional method, which is to hold control and then separate it like this and then join it at each end of the path. But as you can see here, it doesn't always work how you want it to. So this method that I'm going to teach you now is hopefully going to be a lot nicer for dealing with that. And what you're basically going to do is find the corner point here where the path will sort of join to the edge. And then as soon as you click to add it, you're going to remove it. And then it automatically creates this strange like extension on the side of the path. And it's a lot nicer than having that sort of small triangular piece of dirt in the middle of the path that you then have to fill with foliage or a tree or something like that. So it just helps you mold your plazas a little bit more, but you don't really have too much flexibility over it. In the background, I've built like a T shape here, and as you can see, all I'm doing is just joining the path to the side of the path that already exists and then deleting it, and you get these, like I say, they're kind of wacky shapes, and it's a lot easier than doing the triangular bits with the piece of mud in the middle that you then have to decorate. Like I say, I think it just works for helping mold these shapes for plazas rather than just having like your default square or circle. And this piece of path is pretty much complete using all of the tips I've just given you prior to this point. So, and then I'm just sort of doing like a little loose scraggly path that is going to go off in that direction. And then I start working on the part going up to the creek with the bridge. I don't know what this member of staff's doing here. I end up just pressing play to get rid of them quickly so they're out of the way. And yeah, I start working on the extension up to the creek as well, just moving these out of the way just to make sure I've got enough space. I've just paused the footage here just so that I can give you a little bit of a layout on what is going to be going on with this area, and I'll mark it out with a few markers so that you guys can follow along with what's going on as I do it in this next segment. So on the left hand side, on the, you see where the streak of grass is, this is going to be the top of the creek. It's just basically going to be like a ridge where the two pieces of land sort of like are open, and it's going to spill down and it's going to go underneath the bridge to the bottom of the hill on the right. And then I'm going to create like a wall that goes around the back, and it's just going to be on a slant. And then in the bottom right corner here is where we are going to have the lodge, but it's all going to be based downhill. And then the idea being that when you stand on the bridge and you look to your right, you can have like a really nice vista of the valley. There hopefully will be some nice vistas in the background as well, and you'll be able to see some of the sanctuary from this bridge as well. And now we jump on into the planning, and I'm going to be doing this using the in-game terrain paints. I tend to use sand, that's sort of like my main predominant one when I'm doing things like pathing, but given I know where the pathing is going to be going here, I'm using it to sort of like dig out roughly where I want the ridge to be going down. And this whole segment is going to be sped up just a little bit because it's not too riveting. So yeah, I'm using the sand. I'm sort of like giving myself an angle to work with in terms of how far down I want the ridge to even travel. And then I start digging out where I want perhaps the lowest point of this ridge to be, and then I will start working my way up using the exact same method that I just told you with regards to the inclines. I'll stick my flattened foundation tool on, and then I will start clicking my way up. For this, you can increase your intensity because you're not too worried about the incline being like really shallow. People aren't going to be walking down this. It can afford to be a little bit more craggly and rough as you go down, like up the hill towards the top of the ridge. And the same applies when you're working at the top of the ridge. I end up using the pull tool more when I'm working at the top of the ridge, just so I can pull out the terrain into these sort of like weird bulbuses. I don't really want this to be too flat, so here I can just use the pull tool, and then later on I'll end up using the chisel tool, which is probably one of the most underutilized terrain tools in the game. But in terms of getting like natural looking terrain work, I think it really does help, because at the end of the day, nature isn't really that smooth. These things are going to be affected by erosion, and erosion is not a process that makes things look silky smooth at the end of the day. So yeah, you'll see me just like pulling the rock out on the top of the ridge, and then when I'm working from the bottom of the ridge going up to the top, I'll end up using the flatten to foundation tool. The game gives you some really powerful tools to do terrain editing like this, and I think with little tips like this, and just a little bit of know-how, you can really create some pretty outstanding things just by having these little bits of nuggets of knowledge that you can tie together. And I really think this is probably one of my favorite parts of Planet Zoo as a game. Starting off with this sort of blank area, not necessarily a new zoo, but this new area that I'm working with. And it's a bit like working with clay, you know, you sort of like put your hands in and just start melding and molding and seeing what you can create. And if it doesn't go well, then you can undo and just retry again. I think that's the beauty of it at the end of the day. Like, nothing's set in stone. You can really let your imagination go wild with stuff like this. Just trying to work out where the lodge is going to go. So I'm just sort of like peeling the bottom of the ridge out and then making a platform where the lodge is potentially going to go, while constantly chiseling out a ridge so that whatever animal is going to go in here, like I say, I know what animal it's going to be, can't jump out, because I still want to have that lower down bit where escapes are not going to be possible. And flatten to foundation just my way down the ridge so that we had this slow, like this lowering hill at a very low incline. I don't want it to be that you stand on the platform at the top of the ridge and it just be like a sheer drop down and you not be able to see anything. I want it to be really like quite grand at the end of the day. And yeah, I think I managed to nail that look with the initial terrain work here. And the platform at the top of the ridge, this is going to be like a dead end section, so basically you'll end up like going back on yourself. So you'll cross the bridge, you'll maybe take a picture or something like that, and you'll go to the platform, look at whatever's going to be in this habitat, and then turn back on yourself and go back. I think I want most of the expansion from this point on to be going in the complete other direction. We are quite close to the map border here, so this is an area that I sort of want to like tie off, get finished, and then we'll start expanding onto the other sides. We've got a tower that was very kindly built for me by Dommel, and that is something I'm going to be using as like a center point for this whole project. Basically, wherever you are in the sanctuary, hopefully you're going to be able to see this tower, and you can see a little bit of a snippet of it there in the background. And I've put pictures on my socials of the tower as well in the background of certain vista points. And here we are now with the foliage, one of my other favorite parts of the game. Just using trees to sink into the ground to create the like initial backdrop foliage, and then end up pulling out this second piece of rock in the background here, just to make it so that it's not just one flat valley. There's going to be a second higher valley behind the initial one, just to create an extra sense of depth when you're standing on the bridge or the platform looking out into this direction as well. And you'll always see me constantly checking my viewpoints. It's something that I think you have to do if you want it to look how you want it to. You have to put yourself in the guest's shoes occasionally. And I think when you're working with something like this, that it really is something that you need to be doing. And then I just put more foliage in just to help give that second ridge the look that it wants. You see me there looking out onto the valley to see if I can get it looking how I want, while also keeping in mind that there is going to be an animal in here, and I do need some sort of, not hard barriers, but some areas where the animal is not going to be able to jump out very easily, but also keep it looking fairly natural. I don't want there to be like a massive like retaining wall around this whole thing to keep it in. So I'm trying to be smart about this at the same time. I put in a couple of ash trees there as well, just to help with some of the different foliage rather than just having oak trees. And in the background here, I'm doing a bridge, and I'm going to go into a little segment on how I can do this as well and show you how you can do different types of bridges in this game. So initially I was going to go for like an arched bridge, but you'll see me quickly get rid of that idea. But I thought I'd keep this in just to show you as like a little tutorial on how to do arch bridges. Basically what you're going to be doing is placing 3 separate floor pieces in the game, and then you want the 2 out ones to be at like 1 meter lower than the middle one, and then you're going to place a path in the middle of each one of these, like you see me doing here, and then you can basically link them up using, make sure you're using the snapping tool as well, just to make sure that the angles are straight. And then when you're done and you get rid of the path, you end up with this perfectly sort of arched bridge. But then what I end up doing is getting rid of it, because I've worked out that trying to decorate the edge pieces of these arch bridges are quite a lot of work, and I just wanted to go with something a bit more simpler. When your eye isn't really going to be on the bridge, it's going to be on the nature around it. So I don't end up using this bridge in the end. I do end up opting for a straight flat bridge in the end, but I do not regret it at all. I still managed to make something that I was really happy with at the end of the day. I end up just decorating it with like the same as I usually would, just like these wooden beams, and then I end up using the aquatic fence pieces. I end up turning them at a 90-degree angle so that they act as like a barrier for if you was to drop something down, and then I end up rotating them background so that they can actually be the actual fence for the bridge as well. You see me here adding them on the side to act as like a prevention of if you drop something down there, and then I rotate them so that they are the actual fence as well. And then I make the bridge black with a little bit of trim just to help the edge bit here connect to the bridge. And once it's all done, I will do what any normal Planet Zoo player would do, and that is group it all together, copy it, rotate it, and then put it on the other side so that the other side matches. And then I add some little posts at the end of the bridge as well, just so that the ends of the posts aren't just like sticking out, they actually go into like some wooden posts. And now it's time for my favorite part, but not everybody's favorite part. That is the foliage and rock work portion of the build, and arguably is one of the most important. If you really want to sell this look, I think most of that look comes from your foliage and your rock work. The terrain work is huge in terms of like the base of what you're working with, but the foliage on a flat foundation obviously isn't going to be as appealing as foliage on this like creek that I've created. But I still think that if you made like this creek and your rock work and your foliage wasn't quite correct, then I think it's really hard to sell the look that you're going for. Here I'm using the chisel tool just to sort of push through here amongst the creosote. Absolutely love the creosote. I've said it so many times now, and they'll work as like nice for just sort of scattering around. Even the yellow ones with like the little bits of yellow fleck in as well. Custard trees as well, just to help like add a different shade of green. The creosote bushes are more like of a light yellow, or a light green, sorry, whereas these custard trees are obviously a bit darker. Saltwater as well, adding in another sort of texture and color amongst the fray, leaving in these gaps here because I know it's where I want my rock work to be. And my rock work is going to be made of two different types. We're going to have the faux rock like piles, and then we're going to have the temperate like rock set as well, because that's for the color that these faux rocks are made to emulate. I basically create a group here using all of the piles, and then forget that I didn't actually put them in a group. So I had to completely undo it, and then I remembered to group them and make a group, just so that when I clicked one of the pieces of rock, I could then sink it down into the ground rather than just settling on the surface. I think this gives like a much nicer effect than just having them sit flush on the edge of the terrain. On the right hand side here, not going to be doing too much of that work, but I will be doing for this video, I'm going to make the actual creek bit down the middle, and then I'll be doing like the back that then goes around to where the platform is going to be. I'm not going to be touching the main hill piece that is going to be part of the habitat. I'm going to save that obviously for the habitat video. This white plant as well, can't remember what it's called for the life of me, but it's also a very nice one. It adds a bit of color in there and a different texture. The white popping amongst the greens and the yellows is quite nice. And then I start putting in my temperate rock. I'm just filling in the gaps between the rock piles for now, and then what I'll end up doing is using the terrain paint just to paint in where the rest of the gaps are, just so that I'm not overusing the same like rock piece basically. And I'm really happy with how it looks at the end of the day. This top part of the creek in particular, a log in there for a little bit of extra detail. Don't forget to add these little details, they work really well. Here, just add in the stone terrain paint in the gaps where the rock work is on the sheer face of the cliff. And then on this like flatter portion, I'm using the light dirt and the heavy dirt, and then the grass where the actual creosote bushes are, to actually basically make it pop a bit more, as it were. But yeah, it's just going to be me going through decorating the creek now using the creosote bushes and just doing the outskirts of this whole area. And yeah, I'm pretty much going to be leaving you with the rest of this video, and then at the end we will have a little slow-mo, well, flyover, not slow-mo. We'll have a little flyover of the whole area. But thanks so much for watching. It's been a pleasure to build this, and I cannot wait to bring you the animal that is going to be occupying this ridge in the next video. Thank you very much for watching. Peace out, and bye-bye. Love you all.